So this afternoon, I acquired my first hardware synthesizer. I am unbelievably stoked because up until now I've only used Universal Audio's Polymax synth and a couple of Logic's analog synth simulators to do all of my synth work. One of my friends let me borrow an Akai AX80, which I was unfamiliar with until he dropped it off at my workplace today. To my understanding, I think it was kind of supposed to be Akai's competitor to the DX7. It's a fully programmable analog synth. I'm not super well versed in synths, so if something I'm saying is incorrect, then I'm sure anybody who sees this and knows better will correct me. It's a 2-oscillator synth. There is a filter on it. There is an LFO on it. The one that I got specifically is a little interesting. A lot of the buttons that you use to control certain parameters, because this one is old, they either don't work or you have to punch them really hard. So I'm kind of confined to a lot of the presets that are already on it. The funny story about this specific unit though is that the friend who's loaning it to me said that he bought it off of Facebook Marketplace from a lady whose husband used to play it in bands. He passed away, but he left a bunch of his custom presets on the AX80. So I'm not just stuck with all of the cheesy 1984 faux piano, faux guitar, faux flute sounds. It's actually got some pretty cool 80s analog synth sounds. So, to the best of my understanding, I'm going to try and explain the way that this works. Okay, so over here, obviously output is the volume knob. Focus. There we go. The tune knob is like a fine tune. It's like in synths. The control knob we'll get to in just a second. You get your pitch bend and your modulation, and these just affect like how much the pitch will bend. So all the way up is like, I think it's more than an octave. All the way down is none, and then about there is just like one semitone. The modulation is just like how deep the vibrato goes. And then we come to all of our different sections, and you can see these bars, these beautiful little 80s like LED bars, all represent different parameters that you can adjust. So the first one is your first oscillator. You can kind of see it. These down here are what each of these buttons corresponds to. And these bars represent those parameters. So if I go into edit over here, this is important. I think these are different banks. A and B are preset banks. The preset button lets you flip between the presets by hitting these numbers up here. Edit will allow you to edit the presets. So if I go over here to oscillator 1, that little orange bar pops up. That means that I am affecting this parameter. So that parameter is the frequency range, and that's essentially just the pitch. And then you've got your wave shape. I believe that's pulse width modulation, the amount, pulse width modulation speed. You get a sub oscillator, which is cool, and then the overall level of that oscillator. Mostly the same for the second oscillator. Frequency range, I think that's a little more flexible because you can do like different harmonies. You can set it so that it's always a fifth or a major third or whatever above the first oscillator. Detune is exactly what it sounds like. So this one is in cents. Your wave shape, not entirely sure what cross modulation is, but it makes it sound different. EG depth, I believe that has to do with the envelope. From what I can gather, EG is the envelope. EG select between VCF and VCA. So VCA is the amplifier, which is your attack, decay, sustain, release for the actual sound of the synthesizer. Your VCF is your filter, and then that's your volume level for the second oscillator. Over here is the LFO, which unfortunately you really can't adjust any of the LFO settings on this synth because of how hard you would have to push the buttons. I think it probably just needs to go get looked at and get some circuit work done, but ideally you'd be able to adjust the depth, the speed. I'm not entirely sure what the delay of the LFO does, the waveform of the LFO, and then I think there's a couple different LFOs that you can select. Over here is the envelope, attack, decay, sustain, release. Not entirely sure what key follow does. Not entirely sure why you can select different envelopes. Key velocity and level. That is the AX80. And without further ado, I'm going to flip through some presets, play a little bit on this thing. Don't judge because I'm not a very good keys player. I just know a little bit about music theory, so hopefully it doesn't sound terrible. I think the delay under the LFO section may be like a built-in digital delay of some sort, but I'm not entirely sure. Because it does sound like there is a little bit of delay on this preset. Yeah, that one's nice. I like this one a lot. So it's interesting. The button that is supposed to select cutoff for the filter, when I had it set to preset rather than edit, it let me select preset 14, which corresponds to that cutoff button. But when I have it in edit mode, it is not letting me select the cutoff of the filter to adjust that. So you almost have to turn the output knob down a little bit because it does distort a little bit on its own, and that's all happening here in the synth. That's not happening in Logic. Dude, who needs a real organ when you got this? Oh, yep. There's where you start getting into some of that, like when you pitch the second oscillator to a different pitch. Man, I so wish that it would let me adjust the LFO speed right there, because I really want a slow vibrato. Ooh. You probably wouldn't use a preset like that for anything except for special effects. That one's tight. There's almost like some ring modulation going on. Or some, I don't know, maybe that's pulse width stuff. What is that? I think that is going to just about do it. I apologize to any of you piano players out there who just had to sit down and watch me fumble around the keyboard trying to figure out how to make this synth sound good. I'm really excited to put this thing to use. I wish that the buttons worked a little more often. I wish that I had a little more control over the sound of this synth. Sometimes the coolest creations you can make are born out of whatever constraints you find yourself with. I did find myself reading and hearing that this synth was not very well liked when it came out, probably because it was competing with the DX7 and I think the JXP8, which I'm not terribly familiar with. I did hear somebody compare it to Juno, which I'm a little more familiar with, but I think it sounds great. I think there's something so satisfying about having sounds like this come out of an instrument rather than coming from the software. Whether or not they actually sound different, I don't know. It might just be easier to open up a VST, but it's definitely more fun to play with a real instrument. If you enjoyed this content, I would appreciate it so much if you would consider leaving a like and a comment and subscribing if you want to see more of this content, and last but not least, hitting that notification bell to stay up to date when I upload. Just gotta go through the list of standard YouTube jargon. I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for sticking around. God bless. Love you guys. Peace.